All right, let me get into character. Let me get into character for a moment. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
But so, as another episode to this series, we are going to talk about mental health and how being Filipino ties into that and our journey with like being mentally healthy or at least mentally stable. Uh, and so we're not professional psychologists. We're just going to therapy and we're just going to talk about like our experience with that and how we think being Filipino ties into that. Um, I guess I can kind of start. I started going to therapy back in 2018 of my undergrad. So like I think it was sophomore year of my undergrad when I started going. And it was nice. It was definitely like one of those moments where it's just like, oh, I have to do this because I'm sort of being forced by the school to actually go to these meetings. And it was nice at first. Then I kind of got bored of it because it's just like I couldn't really talk about like more pressing issues because like I felt like I was under a microscope. Like if I say the wrong thing, I like get sent to the hospital. Uh, so I was like holding it in, and it was also like a white counselor. So it was just like a white female counselor who is sort of well off. So it's just like we're nothing alike. So I can't talk to you about like most of the things that I would talk about with somebody else. And going to grad school and getting a new one, although they're not Filipino, they are African and they're an immigrant, and we sort of have the same upbringing, the same kind of childhood traumas to talk about. So that is nice. We literally connected like almost instantly on our first meeting, and it was really nice to be like, oh, finally a psychologist that can understand like what weight I'm carrying as a Filipino immigrant.
I didn't know that you started then because I think I was started in 2018. Imagine that.
Look at
Um
that.
yeah, that's weird. So for me, I go to therapy through Cisco's Employee Assistance Program, EAP. I think many companies offer it. I started going to therapy in early 2018 because um I don't really remember exactly what the specific trigger was, but I had gotten into a long distance relationship with my current boyfriend. We started in late 2017, and it was like one of I don't really know how to describe it, but it was clear that this relationship is going to be for the long term, and I wanted that to be addressed because I wanted this relationship to stay strong and stay true. And I didn't want to hurt him in the process. So it was really about figuring out what the hell was going on here that was making me act this way because both of us knew that wasn't who I am as a person. So I started going to therapy in 2018. My therapist was also, I believe she is white. She's definitely my age or very close to it, but I wasn't, it didn't feel easy. For me, I knew that it was something that I needed to do and I wanted to do. And finding a therapist was definitely a little bit difficult because they have to have availability for new patients and they have to take EAP as your insurance. So the choices were very slim. But I ended up being paired with this therapist who is close to my age, also a woman, but she was white. And it wasn't difficult to talk to her because she was white, but it was difficult for me to open up because I didn't want to feel judged, I guess. I didn't want to feel like I was talking ill about like our family. And I didn't want, I guess I just didn't know how to talk about my problems in that way, especially to a stranger. So it took a couple of sessions for me to get to a point where we were talking about the things that I didn't even know I needed to talk through. So for me, going to therapy was really life changing. At the time, you could go to therapy for 8 sessions per concern per year. You can have multiple concerns, so you can have multiple sets of 8 if you wanted to. But after 8 sessions, I pretty much felt a lot better and I had a lot more tools and I was able to work things out better with my boyfriend, and I definitely felt the change of it and the benefit of it. But definitely prior to going to therapy, I was definitely part of that like Filipino American percentage where you just kind of internalize a lot of the pain, right? Like I don't know if you feel that way, but like it's almost like a rites of passage, right? Like the whole struggle that you feel, it's not something, it's just part of life, I guess. And it's not like something that you resolve, it's just something that you deal with. And I don't know if
Mhm.
that's how you feel, but I feel like that's one of the things is like in Tagalog there's a word called kinikip, which is basically like keeping it to yourself like this. So a lot of the hurt and a lot of the things that I now realize were basically abuse, right? I just kinip ko lang, right? I just kept it inside. And going to therapy allowed me to be like, hey, just because that's like how the family culture is like, doesn't mean that that's correct, right? And like that started my journey for mental health and being more open about talking about feelings and understanding where is the hurt and how do I deal with it so that I can move on as a person now.
For me, I definitely feel the whole like keep it inside, like the whole like Frozen song of like don't let them in, don't let them see, be the good girl that you always have to be. That song, ooh, it's literally the life story, but it's just like yeah, there was a lot of moments where it's just like I can't let anybody else like know that I'm hurting. And I think that was like the trigger for me. I'm not going to completely talk about what happened, but it was definitely like one of those moments where I did not reach out to anybody, that I just internalized so much that it was like a breaking point for like my life. And but it was just like one of those things where it's just like I didn't make the connection that I was trying to seek out help. And it was like my way of like, please, somebody please check up on me because I'm not gonna say I need help. Because it was like the culture of like what we had where just like you either can handle it yourself or you just don't try at all. And that gets into the whole like perfectionist thing.
It definitely becomes easier to reach out for help when, like, okay, I'm gonna say this with a caveat, and the caveat is that your boyfriend, your partner, your girlfriend, whomever they may be to you, whatever you may call them, they are not your therapist. Please do not take
Absolutely.
them as such. They are human beings. Please don't
Absolutely.
take them as such. They are not your Lord God Savior. They are not that person. That's the caveat. But, however, one of the ways that I was kind of woken up from the way that I've been doing things and the way that I've just kind of been like pushing through like this was I'm so used to just like turtling when I'm hurt and just like pushing forward. And when you're in a relationship, when you push forward like that, you are more than likely to be hitting against the person that you are in a relationship with. One of the things that I'm not going to go into too much detail about this, um, but the one of the ways that I've seen the adults in my life interact, right? Because our dad was away, a lot of the times we were under the care of different adults in our lives. The way that they resolved arguments was very explosive, and that's really all I knew. And when you get into a relationship and you get into arguments, the things that you've seen in your past, even though you might not agree with them because that is all that you've seen, they become your pattern. It's kind of like that nature versus nurture thing, right? That's not who I am. It just may be how I'm reacting because that's all I know how to do. So therapy was really helpful for me in terms of like understanding what is it like how I deal with emotions because a therapist is not only a person that listens to your issues, they're trained to empathize with you and understand you from your standpoint, and then give you tools that'll help you from your standpoint. That's the key difference. It's yes, you can tell your significant other about your problems, and yes, it can relieve stress and heavy feelings in your heart, but they're not trained for this. They're not going to be able to tell you how to maneuver those feelings like my therapist has done, right? So definitely, please do not treat your significant other as such because that's a lot of responsibility on them. That's like one of the things with Filipino culture, Filipino American culture, I guess, is that when like people go, like your parents go to America and they give up everything and they don't complain about it because they want to give you a good life. And you're always told by all the adults in your life that you're like people have made big sacrifices for you to be here. That kind of implicitly tells you you're not really allowed to complain about what you're feeling because it's not tantamount to the sacrifice that was done to bring you here. And I think that's one of the reasons why we do the kinikip is because we feel like our pain isn't worthy of like being voiced out because it's not as big as the sacrifice that brought us here. And that's one of the things that I work through in therapy is that like, hey, like it's fine that like your problem isn't as big as that thing. It's still big to you and you need to address it as such without labeling it as big or small. Just address it for you. So tidbit from the Filipino American point of view, I guess.
I guess the Filipino American point of view for me, I've been through three different, I call it cycles in my head, cycles with the psychology, my counselor. And it's pretty much like in each cycle, I focus mainly on one issue. And it's like, I think that's a good way to enter a psychologist appointment. They're not there to fix your entire being. Most cases, you probably only have like less than 10 meetings with them. And it's probably like once every 2 weeks or maybe once every week if you're like that like privileged. But in most cases, like to me at least, I view my psychology appointments as just like a check-in. It's just like a way for me to be like, here's what's been happening with my life, and here's where like I think issues from the past are starting to resurface, and I want to deal with this one issue that I think is related to this one, but I think that's too big to handle. But I just want to like what is it called? Like test case, test case this scenario, and it's just like to me, the Filipino thing did come up where it's just like I'm keeping a lot of things inside about like how I lived and how like I can't complain, how I can't say that I need help because that translates to you're not giving me enough of a help that I need to physically ask for more help. That it's just like I didn't realize that that was like bothering me so much. Um, but it sort of translates to like the second session because the first session that I went for psychology was for depression. The second session was mainly for like how I interact with my family. Like I can't speak to my family, and that's the issue that I came in with. I'm just like I grown to be because this is the point where it's just like I had one cycle of psychology. I know like how things work, sort of. So by the time I hit the second session, I'm just like, I know this is an issue, and I'm having trouble trying to find my way through the issue. And they helped me a lot. And like the issue was that as a Filipino American immigrant, as somebody who just did not know how to speak or didn't feel like they could speak, it was one of those things where it's just like I needed to be able to speak because it got to that point where I couldn't even say good things anymore. I couldn't even say like, "Oh, I got a job," or "Oh, I got accepted to grad school." It was like one of those things where it's just like I can't say anything good because I internalized so much that I can't say anything bad that all the good has now absorbed into that.
Yeah. And I just wanted to like touch upon I think another maybe it's Asian American or like because I feel like this is relevant not just to Filipinos but also Southeast Asians, South Asians, East Asians. It's like that whole meme about how like people don't apologize. Like your immigrant mom cuts you up apples to apologize, and your immigrant dad buys you like 10 watermelons to apologize, right? No one actually really says sorry. For me, I thought that I had grown above the whole like stereotype, the whole challenge of not being able to say sorry, but I actually hadn't. I was just reacting to like I was like doing my own cutting up fruit, except I wasn't cutting up fruit. I was doing something else as an apology, which is not actually an apology. I think that's one of the things that you can also talk through in therapy. And if you're like me, where you don't really know what to talk about, you can just start talking about like what your thoughts are, or you can literally tell your therapist or your psychologist that day that like, hey, I know we have a appointment today, don't really know what to talk about, and then they can help you. They can just like you can just talk, and then they'll help you figure it out. And you don't have to talk about bad stuff all the time in therapy. Like you
Mm-hmm.
don't have to have a problem to go into therapy.
Mm-hmm.
Can we just say that? You don't have to have a problem to go into therapy. Therapy is for everybody. It is not accessible because healthcare is an expensive joke everywhere, basically. But like therapy is for everybody, but a therapist might not be for you. Johan mentioned that he had three. He's had
I'm
three
on my
so far.
third.
Yeah, he's on
I'm
his
on my
third.
third.
I am on my fifth. So when I first did therapy was in 2018, and I stuck with that person through all of my 8 sessions. I took a few months break because I was feeling better, and then I was also traveling, and then I attempted to go back to therapy because I had it and I wanted to use it. Um, but like I had this one session with this one person, did not work out. I tried a different person, did not work out. I tried a different person, it didn't work out. So that was kind of a bust. But now I'm back on it because I suffered depression. Um, Actually, let me backtrack. I have, I always forget what the term is. Okay, I have persistive depressive disorder, I believe. It's a mild case of depression that is long term, meaning that it just stays, it just floats around due to certain things. But it's not to a point where it's a major depressive order where I need to get medication. It's just like I have to be careful about it because people like me are susceptible to seasonal affective disorder, which is when I get sad when it's haven't been out in the sun in a while. So I found that out in my first therapy session that I have that, and so I wanted to keep going to therapy to keep that in check, even though I didn't need it because I felt like I was doing good. Um, I went back to therapy this year, a couple of months ago, because I just hit depression really badly in quarantine. A lot of my life was felt like it was crumbling away, and I was again doing the kini kip kip. Um, yeah, so therapy's good. Mental health is a
Therapy
nightmare to
is
deal
for
with. Yeah.
Therapy is for everybody. I say like literally to like my cohort mates are just like, yeah, go to CAPS. One, it's already included in our fees. Like might as well use it because we have access to it. So do it. And like I mentioned this in like pretty much a lot of like my tips videos where I'm just like keep your mental health in check, mental health above all else pretty much. Like because mental health will translate to physical health. So there's always that like if your mental health is good, then your physical health will probably like portray that. So to me, like I'm going into my third cap session, not because I really need it, but because it's here and I might as well use it to keep in check. And now that I've started doing it and like issues have surfaced, not because not and like issues have surfaced, I have this resource that I've been going to consistently. Now I can bring up an issue now. Because my first two sessions was literally just like, let's talk about like myself, let's get acquainted as like a patient and like a counselor kind of relationship. So the first session was literally us talking just about my history. It wasn't like about like, oh, we need to deal with this problem like right now. But like the second session, I was like, this is starting to happen. And they were just like, okay, let's start working through that. And like the third session, it was just like, how was what we talked about last week? So there's definitely like, uh, you don't need to be in a mental crisis to reach out to a therapist. It's definitely just nice to have that relationship built already so that when a crisis does happen, they're already there. They know what your history is, they know how to talk to you, and you know how to talk to them, which is more important.
I think now's a good time to kind of just talk briefly about how frequently we go to therapy and how we started it, like the process. Right?
Mhm.
So I go to therapy for couples therapy. We go once a month, so roughly every 3 weeks. Um, for my personal therapy, I do it every other week, but I use Talkspace. It's my EAP has Talkspace now. If you don't know Talkspace, it's an app where you can text with a therapist. So I sometimes text my therapist, not really a lot of the time. I mostly use it for the 30-minute video sessions that we have every other week. And the way that I started doing it is by I knew of EAP because it was part of the orientation, like the knowledge share that they give during orientation. But if you are working and you're curious to know if your company offers EAP, reach out to someone in HR, or if you have like a company employee side, you can usually just Google EAP in that or search for EAP in that site, and it should give you the resources. Um, the nice thing about EAP is that it's often also available not just to you, the employee, but also to your family and friends, so that you can share this so that therapy does become more accessible because it is, again, it's for everybody. Yeah. I never did like
Uh,
TAPS in college. I knew that it existed. My ex housemates did it. But yeah, I guess you can talk about it more.
Okay, so in college, in both undergrad and grad, there is the CAP system in your school. It's, I forgot, counseling and psychological services in your campus. And more likely than not, it is part of the student fees that you pay in the beginning of the semester. So you're already paying for it. So I think I should like really like I think it is our duties as students to make use of whatever we're paying for in that school. So like gyms, public like fees and also like all that stuff. I think it's something that we have to use as students because if not, then they're just raking in money at this point. So I like to make a joke of just like if they have enough resources for like you, then they have enough resources for everybody. So just bombard them. It's their job to be like, we can't handle another student, but they're not going to say that. So they're going to handle you. They're going to accommodate you, and to like mirror what was talking about before. I started doing therapy through CAPS, and the first session that I had was enforced. I was not legally, but I was contractually bounded to be like, I will go to therapy and I will go to therapy. And I went to therapy. But like after that was done, so yeah, go to your CAPS. There should be a website like if you just Google your school and then CAPS CAPS and it'll pop up. And it's free if you paid student fees.
Yeah, you should definitely do it. I think there are also hotlines that you can use. Will flash here.
You mean I gotta
Um,
edit that?
so
But
one
it's
of
fine.
us, one
No,
of
I'll
us will
edit it.
edit it, and we'll add it here because therapy is for everybody. It's really important. But like we've been like talking about therapy a lot because again, it's so important and it's so helpful. Like we cannot like okay, here's how I view it. If your tooth aches, you're not gonna go to your best friend to get it solved. You're gonna go to a dentist. So if something is going on here, you should go to a professional. That's it. Not to say that you're not supposed to tell your problems with somebody. They're not
There's sharing and then there's seeking help. I think that's the distinction here. Sharing with friends, seeking help with counselors,
yes, that's a
which is what I
that's
do. What I do that
great.
with my friends. I'm just like, this is me sharing that I am going through this, and this is me going to my counselor because I need help.
Yeah, that's well put. I'll start using that too. But like I wanted to kind of segue into things that's not therapy that help mental health. For me, a really big thing was surprisingly exercise. I know that everybody says exercise does wonders for like the mind and the body, but I've always kind of I was really asthmatic when I was younger. Like I don't remember going outside to play tag very much, but I clearly remember sitting down, hooked up to I don't know what it's called, machine or something where it helps you breathe and you breathe in some like medicine with it. Um I remember
Inhaler.
that distinctly. And I don't know if you remember this, but I was really asthmatic when I was younger. I grew out of it, but I just kind of always pictured myself as like someone that's not very athletic. So I never really wanted to do sports again because I didn't want to feel incompetent. But I started working out because I wanted to hike and not feel like a loser because I was panting after 15 steps. And yeah, that was it. I just because my boyfriend and I we love to hike, but I would always struggle, so I made it a goal to be able to like build up endurance so that I wouldn't have to struggle and I could just enjoy the view, right? So I started going to therapy and started exercising diligently. And even when I'm out of therapy, when I'm feeling kind of wonky, I go to the gym and afterwards I feel like I've already done something with my day and it's only 8 o'clock. And that's huge. So I exercise. That's another thing for me in terms of keeping up my mental health. And the other thing is I do creative stuff just to think about literally anything else. I don't know how to say this. Like I have a travel diary, where the trash that I collect in my trips, like receipts and candy wrappers and shit, I like put it on a nice paper and like I detail out what I did that day. Yeah. So those are the things that I do when I'm feeling meh and I'm not in therapy. So what about you?
For me, I do want to talk about exercise for a moment because I did started going to the gym because I knew it like improved my mental health. But the other thing that I do is also get creative because we can't ever not be different people, honestly. Uh,
The sides
but
of the same coin. But yeah, so like that's just the digression is that we tend to do the same thing, but we do it differently.
to get back to topic, the thing that I do to like when I'm having an off day is I try to be creative. I now dedicate about an hour or two of my like week to video game streaming. And to me, I think that's a creative outlet because I get to like do stuff. I like compose music because it's just like fun. I do like that like once in a while. But like whenever I'm having an off day, I do tend to check my environment first to be like, do I have the windows closed? Do I have like fresh air going into my apartment? Have I cleaned up my apartment? Because there's a lot of factors in your environment that can determine what your mood is. So like I try to keep windows open. I try to have like a draft going. I try to not have too much of a mess because mess to me translates as like stress because it's just like just sitting there, just like I should clean that up. So yeah, to me, it's like checking my environment first and then getting active and then getting creative.
So here's the thing, right? We also both do therapy, but I think we may talk about the same thing, but we've definitely done therapy for different reasons.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I also want to point out that like even though I did it first, my brothers have definitely followed in the footsteps, but they've looked at what I've done and was like, "Oh, that part didn't work. I'm gonna do this thing." And so I look back and I'm like, "Oh shit, they're better than me." And it's like constantly, this is constant. Like with Johan, it's like the creative part, it's the going after grad school part where that was just like a thought in my head. for our other brother Robin, he's a much better software engineer than I am, and I am not like big enough to not admit that. He's definitely a lot better at being an engineer than I am because he's had to put a lot more rigor into finding that full-time position. So like my brothers may be doing the same thing, but they're doing it in their own way, and I think that's part of like realizing that difference and that difference of way of thinking and accepting that we're different people is something that I've learned also in therapy is that like like your brothers are not you, you are not your brothers, and you may have been told all your life that you're responsible for them because family is king in Filipino culture, but they are not your life. So, you know, even though you might feel like they're a reflection of you, like you feel guilty. This is something that I talked about in therapy is that I felt really guilty when I was in college. And I would look at the family chat and they'd be talking about how our youngest brother is having a hard time in school and I haven't talked to him in like a year, basically. And I just felt really guilty about that. And that kind of resurfaced in therapy and mental health and how much I realized that was weighing me down. And now that I've kind of accepted, like, hey, my brothers may have like emulated or I might have paved the way for them, they're still doing their own thing, they're still their own person. And it's great to be able to like look back and like see like different paths being carved out, right? From the one that I kind of moved went on. So it's cool. Don't know how that relates back to mental health, but that was cool.
All right, so I hope you enjoy our discussion about mental health and how being Filipino ties into that. I hope you enjoyed our discussions and our talks, and hopefully you're able to join along in your own sort of Filipino circle and talk about what we've been talking about. And but that's it for me. Do you want to have parting words?
Therapy is for everybody. There's a difference between sharing and seeking help. And like the thing is, I think that a lot of the times, as immigrants, as children of immigrants, we feel like if we say that we're having a hard time, that somehow makes us ungrateful for the sacrifice that brought us here. That's like a really big deterrent for you to talk about your problems. Don't think of it that way. Just talk about it. You're not hurting the other person by admitting to yourself that this is something that you need to work through with a professional. Maybe you're not disqualifying that their sacrifices brought you here. You're just honoring the feelings that's in your heart, and you should cancel the kinikip culture away from your head because that'll just you'll just cave in so much that nothing will be left of you, and that would be a shame. So,
All right, see ya.
bye.